very accommodating, and this is where we'll be every first Tuesday. Hi, how you doing? What we normally do is if we have anyone who is new to our group, we ask that person to tell us where they live and how they got involved in politics. That doesn't go for you candidates. The only person I see is Morgan Richards. Morgan, so you're on.
Okay. I'm Morgan Richards. I'm Candice Bailey's campaign manager. And I got into politics because my dad, Dick Richards, ran for the state house in 1972 in Arapahoe County. And I knocked doors for him. And it's been an amazing experience by Candice's side because I'm also discovering a lot more about how I ended up here today. So, lifelong Dem. Thank you, Everet.
Welcome, Morgan. We hope we see you at a lot of our other meetings.
Okay.
One, can we turn it down just a little bit? Thank you.
Oh, okay, guys. Ruben Medina, the candidate for Ward 3, will join us virtually. He'll join us on TV. But we will get started because Ruben hasn't come on to the TV yet. And the ground rules for tonight is that each candidate will speak for 3 minutes. Each candidate will introduce themselves and tell us in those 3 minutes why they want to be a member of the Aurora City Council. Okay, we're going to start right in with our meeting, and I'd like to call on the incumbent City Council member for Ward 1, who actually started her campaign here in the first Tuesday meeting in 2017. And I'd like to call on Crystal Murillo.
Future Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Everet, for convening us. This is awesome. I'm so excited. Yes, and I see your crystal sticker. Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Murillo. It's really an honor to be with you all. I understand this is the first in-person, first Tuesday in a very long time. I almost was virtual, FYI, just because I was going to be traveling for work. But if you don't know me, I grew up here in Aurora. I went through our public schools, Aurora, Cherry Creek Public Schools. Went to graduate with a bachelor's at DU, University of Denver. The first in my family to graduate high school and college. Now, young professionals recruiting at the University of Denver by day, and by night-ish, city council members. So, Dylan, would you mind not blocking everyone? Thank you. Yeah, if you could. But yeah, so I very much believe in equity and access for community. The challenges that I felt like I went through growing up are still the same challenges I see today. Right, we don't have affordable housing, and I mean affordable housing for at any point in your life, right? Different points in your life. Good quality housing. That's something that I really focused on in the last 4 years because I know that's a big need in Aurora and in my district. So I sought out and became the chair of our housing committee for 3 years. And under my leadership, we created our first ever strategic housing plan for the city of Aurora. And that's a big deal. We're the 3rd largest city, but we didn't have any investments in those areas. And we also now have our first ever housing department. So we've laid a strong foundation the past almost 4 years on city council. And I've been really honored to lead this effort. We have a lot more work to do, and that's why I'm seeking re-election. I wasn't sure that that was going to be the case. It's a lot having to work 2 jobs, you know, as a young professional, but you know, it wouldn't be the first time I've had to do that. But I just feel really strongly about building on the work and the progress we've made. So I'm running for re-election to be able to build on that. I also believe in livable wages for folks. And fighting for justice, and I mean that in all of the sense, right? Environmental justice, racial justice for our community members. So again, I'm just super honored to be with you all, and excited to see some friendly, familiar faces. And please let me know if I can help answer any questions. And I'm sure Everet has a really wonderful list of questions lined up. So thank you all. Yes.
Who can vote for you, District 1?
Oh, thank you. So Ward 1 is Northwest Aurora. So my southern border is 6th Avenue. So 6th Avenue north to the Denver-Aurora border and west to the Denver-Aurora border. East is roughly Chambers. There's one census tract that is part of Ward 2, but I think generally those are the districts. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions while we're waiting? All right, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Crystal. And I'm sure you're in it for the money, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Ruben Medina has joined us on the screen on Zoom, and we're going to ask Ruben to tell us a little bit about himself, what ward he's running for, and why he's running for the Aurora City Council. Go ahead, Ruben.
Hang on a sec, Ruben, we can't hear you.
Can you turn the volume up?
Yeah, on the side over here.
Hey, Ruben, 1 second.
Hang on a second, Ruben, we can't
Just
hear
a
you.
second, Ruben.
All right, say something, Ruben.
Juan, you should pin his video.
Yes. I'm not hearing you out of the TV, which is a problem.
Somebody say the microphone next to it.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, Ruben. So let's do a couple things here. Let's pin Ruben so you can.
All right. Hello, and thank you everyone for coming. I would be there in person, but I'm also co-facilitating a training that I do in the community right now. So I'm co-facilitating and training community leaders right now. So I apologize for not being in person. Again, my name is Ruben Medina. I'm running for Aurora City Council in Ward 3. I have raised my 3 children here in Aurora, and I've lived here for the past 32 years. And I've been married for 30 years to my wife, who is a first grade teacher at Montview Elementary. I'm running to address the many inequities and disparities that have been elevated since the pandemic, such as affordable housing, people experiencing homelessness, livable wages, and policing. And I'll be using all my connections and resources in the community to help solve the many issues the city faces. We need leaders who have integrity and transparency and get the job done. We need leaders like that, and I'll give you some examples. When I was 20 years old, I started an ambulance service in my small hometown called Walsimer. I got the necessary equipment and ran the service out of my home. It still thrives today, 40 years later. Later, I was the facility manager for the Moorhead Recreation Center in Northwest Aurora, where I worked with community and created a coalition of community members, nonprofits, foundations to advocate and eventually get the city of Aurora to build the first new recreation center in Aurora in 40 years and not raise taxes. My current role as the project manager for the Foundation for Sustainable Urban Communities, I work in Northwest Aurora and Montebello communities, building leaders and having them work on the issues in their communities to address housing, COVID response, food insecurities, community policing, etc. Also, as a consultant on community engagement, I teach communities across the United States and in Africa how to become leaders and address the issues using their many gifts and talents of community. As you can see, in my past, present, and now in the future, I'm a person of action and get things done. I hope you will join me as we move forward to making Aurora a beacon of hope and bring positive changes where all can thrive, be prosperous, and feel safe. Again, my name is Ruben Medina. Go to my website, Medina4Aurora.com. Thank you.
Okay.
Juan.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. Ruben, if you can hang out, at the end of all of the candidates, you're going to have a Q&A. Okay? Next, we'll move to Ward 2. And a person who is very familiar to the First Tuesday group, because when he was running for Ward 6, he often spoke to the First Tuesday group. And Bryan is our personal star. Bryan, would you like to follow the format?
Yes, I'd love to. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Bryan Lindstrom. I grew up here in Aurora. I went through Aurora Public Schools, K through 12, and now I'm a teacher in Aurora Public Schools. I teach at Hinckley High School, which is in my district in Ward 2. And the reason why I got in is strictly because of the impacts the city has on my classroom. About 15% of my students live in unstable housing. So when people ask me, well, why don't you run for school board? Why don't you run for state ledge? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Housing is education policy. Environmental policy is education policy. Wages are education policy. And that's why I'm involved in city politics. So I'm running because I believe that workers deserve dignity. Workers deserve a wage to where one job is enough to pay your bills. But in Aurora, that's not the case. A minimum wage worker has to work 72 hours a week to afford to stay one-bedroom apartment. Like, that's not cutting it. That is not equitable, that is not justice. So I'm running to bring economic justice. I feel like I'm repeating Crystal. Racial justice, and you'll probably hear those echoes. That's the side effect of being close and being a team. But I'm running because I want to bring an Aurora into the future, and that means greener Aurora, an economic justice Aurora, and Aurora that works for all of us. So, again, my name is Bryan Lindstrom, and I'm running for Ward 2.
So we're holding off on Q&A.
Hold off on Q&A.
We're going to hold off on the Q&A until our two at-large candidates is over. We've got two people who are running for at-large for all of Aurora. And maybe one of these candidates can describe Aurora to us. We're going to start with John Ronquillo.
I'm going to take my mask off so you can see me speak as well, too. My name is John Ronquillo. I'm one of the two candidates who is running for Aurora City Council at large, which means any part of incorporated Aurora, sorry Leslie, you can vote for two of us, right? And there are two of us here tonight who are going to talk to you about why we're doing this, why we love Aurora as much as we do, and why it's critical that we put people on that dais who are going to guide us into the future. I'm running for a lot of reasons, many of the reasons you've already heard from our other candidates. And it is inspiring to be able to hear the things that matter to them, to validate the things that matter to us, and to work together. Because one of the things that a lot of people have criticized about the council, to give some variation to what everybody has said, is it's dysfunctional. right? I think there are a lot of areas that have revealed themselves to be very dysfunctional in terms of how the city operates. And so as much as I talk about some of the issues that I share with my fellow candidates, one of my big priorities going into this is to hunker down and get some good administrative reforms brought about. Aurora is a big city with big city issues, and I believe we can confront that with some big city vision. And to give you some scale, right, to just not reiterate that we're a bedroom community in the metro area. Notice I didn't refer to that other city next to us. We are bigger than 4 NFL markets. We're bigger than Pittsburgh, we're bigger than Cleveland, we're bigger than Cincinnati, we're bigger than New Orleans. And I think it's time that the city of our size and our caliber starts to act like it. I think we have a lot of issues, many of these issues that are accelerating at a pace we can't catch up with. It's time that we really, really focus on solutions and that we're data-driven when we make those decisions. I want to echo what Crystal and Bryan and Ruben have all said about our local economy. I believe there's a lot of strides that we can make there. We have a dire situation in terms of the trust between our community and the police. And I want to reiterate the need for public safety, because I believe everybody deserves to feel safe in their homes. I believe everyone deserves to feel safe in their jobs, and everyone needs to feel safe in their communities. And I'm going to stop there because I'm feeling there's going to be some big questions, and I feel like I've talked to so many of you so many times before. But it's time for us to have the opportunity to finally count to 6 and to bring about so many of the changes that we need. To bring back the minimum wage ordinance, to bring back more ordinances that focus on affordable housing, to figure out ways to ensure that the Civil Service Commission is not hampering the chief of police when she wants to actually hold her officers to account or wants to discipline them. It's time for us to actually take some tractionable action and to move the city forward. So again, my name is John Ronquillo. I am one of the 2 candidates running for at large, and recall that you can vote for 2. So thank you very much.
Thanks, John. And next, I'd like to call up a candidate who is shown by her trepidation that she really wants to be a member of the Aurora City Council, Candice Bailey.
Yeah.
Step on anybody. Sorry about that. So I'm Candice Bailey, and I'm running for City Council at large in Aurora. And I was thinking about the reason that I ran as I was listening to what everybody was saying. And there were a few reasons. My kids. I have a special needs 11-year-old son at home. And he has experienced a lot in his very young life around medical issues. And so I became a mental health advocate. I have a 14-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old son, and a 22-year-old son. They all have mental health issues that they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And I watch them every day going through something systemically that people didn't quite understand. I worked inside juvenile justice for almost 2 decades, watching our crime rate continue to escalate, watching no solutions, watching us throw human beings away whose brains hadn't even fully developed. I went through a horrible divorce with a very, very brutal ex-husband who was extremely violent. And I went through the system. I went through a system that belittled me, that dehumanized me, that kept me from being able to have a safe place to live. I'm running for city council at large because I've lived in every single ward in this city. I have been a resident for more than 30 years. I raised my children here. I work inside of the city. I sit on the Youth Violence Prevention Committee, the Police Oversight Committee, the Budget Oversight Committee. There's not much in Aurora that I don't have my finger in, whether you know it or not. And so, there's not much I really have to say, but you're voting for me whether you know it or not, because I'm doing the work every day that influences the lives that you live, that influences the money that's being spent, who's getting that money, who's overseeing what's happening in our city for our community. And 9 times out of 10, I'm the voice that you call to advocate for you when something's going wrong. I have a proven track record of advocacy and standing up for the things that save human beings. So I think a vote for me is a vote for you, because I'm looking out for you every day in every way to make sure you have what you need in your city. I appreciate you inviting me here tonight. It's an honor. I know many of the members because I see you at the city council meetings, and I've heard you all speaking and asking the questions that I too am asking as a citizen of this community. And it's so valuable to me that you all are engaging civically, because my children are looking at us and they want to know that we're involved, because it does matter. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you all so much for being an example to me and to my kids. Thank you.
Thanks, Candice. Hi, Linda. Okay, we're going to take just a short break so that the food can be served.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to yell out the food out for y'all. If you guys can just focus real quick with me, and I'll get it all done.
You want to
Yeah. So I've noticed that since the Democratic Party started receiving a lot more money, see here, Lindstrom, you're outraising Sundberg, Murillo, you're way outraising, what's his name, Bill Gundres. And I've noticed that the rhetoric has turned into, let's do some economic development. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea if it's done smartly. Usually economic development is something that the Republicans run hard on. And so my question to all of you is, okay, economic development, how does that raise everyone up? Especially those people who are falling through the cracks, because the people who are falling through the cracks are supposed to be the people that the Democratic Party represent. And I'm pretty sure all of you are part of the Democratic Party. So what's the plan?
Okay, Bryan?
So my rhetoric hasn't changed. I've been running on the same platform I ran in 19, same platform I'm running on now. I raised $50,000 in 2019. Over the course of 11 months, I'm running a much different campaign. I got in 2 months ago. My money's coming from the same place. I have 500 individual donors. I've gotten 200 in the last 5 days, averaging $11.72 a piece. So I felt some insinuation of developer money. I've never taken developer money, I never will. I only take money from people who share my values. So all my money is from individuals, unions, and environmental groups. And in regards to the development, I think housing is a right, and I think wages are important, and that is my focus, and that will always be my focus. So I'm honestly not even sure where that question came from, because again, my rhetoric has not changed one bit since I've been in politics.
Okay, so can I just reiterate on that?
You want me to go ahead and answer? All right. Same. Ditto. Is that good? No. I think when Bryan talks about economic justice, when Crystal talks about economic justice, and I talk about economic opportunity, we're really traversing around some of the same areas. One of the things that I think has really booted up our community recently was the opening of the NAACP's Economic Development Center. I think that is a prime example of what it is that we're trying to address. I don't think there's any shift. I'm actually getting massively outraged by our opponents. I don't know where Candice is, but I mean, we've got one candidate who's the handpicked mayor of the let's not say he's handpicked mayor. Handpicked candidate of the mayor who's sitting on $140,000 4 weeks before the election. Why? Right? So I've hit almost $60,000. And to run in a race that is half the congressional district, it takes resources. I have not taken money from anybody that I have a guilty conscience about. If there is somebody who I'm curious about their business practices, I have asked them very directly how they plan on working with the city, what their intent is, if they are involved in housing. Do they have affordable housing, or do they support inclusionary zoning? I also believe that the city needs to limit the kickbacks that it gives to corporations. I think that corporations absolutely have to pay their fair share. And I believe that given the amount that the city brings in on the backs of small businesses, that we need to reinvest in our small businesses. And in particular, I would like us to help our minority-owned businesses, our women-owned businesses, and our immigrant-owned businesses a little boost, right? An injection, especially post-pandemic, where business was already tough for a lot of folks, but the pandemic really accentuated how difficult small business was. So we want to be a business-friendly city, especially when it creates jobs, especially when the city is able to benefit from it, and especially when it's done fairly and equitably, and isn't just shoving cash in the back pocket of a developer, but is actually growing our local economy, because everybody can benefit from that. When we pay people a better wage, people are going to spend more in their local communities. When we have people who are secure in their jobs, they're going to perform better for their bosses. Business productivity will increase. We won't have as much absenteeism or turnover, right? There are lots of benefits. Look, I know it's a chain, and I know people probably have a lot of qualms with it. I do sometimes. But go look at In-N-Out Burger, which opened a year ago and still has cars backed up. This company pays their employees what they're worth, gives them benefits, and does pretty well with their business model. I think it's a model that could be replicable. But when I say that we want to be business friendly, sure, we want to be friendly from top to bottom, but we also have to be friendly and very supportive of those businesses that help the city actually survive financially. So, who's next?
Candice, do you want to take a crack at that?
I think I can.
Don't fall through the crack.
I have a tendency to do that as a black woman, Dolan. So here we are tonight. We're talking about where does money come from, right? I don't have money. I have like $2,000 that I've raised, and I'm not running a campaign that is money based. I am not that individual. I don't run off the backs of checks that people don't receive. For me, it was very important to sit down with myself during this campaign, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and I have an issue with asking people for dollars that are struggling simply to survive and eat, right? And so for me, there's not a dollar that I have to hide. You guys are welcome to look at anything you'd like. Anything you'd like. Every penny that I have received has come from people who support me, people who know me, people who know that ethically, morally, we match one another, and I'm going to fight for what they need. So I can identify with the dollars that have been poured into the Democratic Party that I don't know what you're referencing, but from my campaign and my perspective, there's not a dollar that someone's going to give to me that has any questions tied to it. Those people generally don't even talk to me, Dolan. They don't want to give me money. I promise they don't. And I never take it. My moral rise is too high for that. We have issues from Ward 1 to 6 that look like $140,000 income gap. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking to developers that are here raping our community and laying the liabilities on homeowners through taxes, on people who are working every day through taxes. That's not something I'm interested in having a conversation about. I am more likely to have these Chuck Taylors on the ground talking to someone who likely needs a resource that I may have access to. I'm the people's champ, so I never accept it. There's not someone in a fancy suit who's going to come woo me. I'm not for sale, so I'm not accepting donations from someone who does not align with me in every single way.
Thank you, Candice.
Everett, we have another $2.
order.
Okay, we're gonna take a break while food is being served.
Alright, I got a chicken sandwich.
Mike's not working.
Hello. Here we go. It helps if you turn it on. I hope everyone's gotten their food. Looks like that's the case. I don't want to be redundant. I agree with a lot that's been said here. I feel good about where I've gotten in donations. I have no regrets either. Coming into this, I started building this campaign about a year ago, actually, because I knew that things were going to look a little bit different this time around. And you know what? I've learned some lessons after running once. So I'm glad and proud to have applied the lessons that I've learned. I have a full-time job. I am on city council and I'm running for re-election. That's 3 jobs. That in and of itself could be a full-time job individually. So I knew what the commitment was like. And so knowing what I learned from 2017 and knowing the commitment that I felt to this community and doing a good job, I started fundraising many months ago. So I'm really proud to have been consistent and a strong a campaigner this time around, and I felt that way last time. It just looks different when you have a little bit more experience. But I felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants last time because I was a new candidate, and I think there isn't a wrong way to do this. It can be done. You have to focus on what gets people to vote. But I have also no problem with the donations I've taken. I also have no problem advocating for livable wages. That's economic development. When people have more disposable income, they can spend more money, infusing dollars into our local economy. That's economic development. So I've been consistent there. I've also been consistent in supporting small locally owned businesses as well. Trying to make sure that they survive the COVID pandemic. It was hard before, it's still hard, and there are challenges that have gotten worse that we need to address. So we have $65 million coming in from the federal government for COVID relief. I'd love to continue to funnel that back into community. The government, as city council, is good at some things. We are not good at some other things that our small businesses and nonprofits know how to do. So I have no problem advocating for economic development, because when I say that, I very much mean let's infuse it back into these organizations that are connecting with people who fall through the cracks, as I think Candice mentioned earlier, people who get left out of our healthcare system, get left out of larger economic incentive packages. We need to be nimble. So I've been very happy to support all of those efforts, and will continue to do that moving forward.
Thanks, Crystal. I've got a question. I watched a study session last night of the Aurora City Council, and it was proposed that Aurora have a climate committee, and that went down. Crystal, can you speak to that?
Okay, yeah, so as Everett said, one of our council members, Councilmember Coombs, was proposing a climate action committee. So we have, I think, just over 30 citizen advisory committees, and the proposal was to have one specifically focused on climate change. And it was really unfortunate that it didn't pass, because people were kind of missing the point, and for whatever reason refused to vote for a specific committee focused solely on climate change. We have an oil and gas advisory committee. Part of their role in society impacts climate change, but their sole focus is not on climate change. We have a water policy committee. Part of their role is to impact our long-term sustainability, but their sole focus is not climate change. So I thought it was a very straightforward proposal. It made a lot of sense, but it was voted down, unfortunately. I think folks started to vote against it for not on policy merits, which I thought was even more unfortunate. We're really going to focus on, they pointed out like a Facebook post that another council member had made that offended them. I can't believe we had a legitimate conversation about policy because somebody's feelings were hurt off of a Facebook post. I think that was wholly disappointing. So, I mean, my 2 cents is that A, it should have passed. Why is it wrong to have an advisory committee to evaluate climate impact? That we know that climate change is real and it's happening. We have to start making tangible movements towards that if we're going to do anything about it. And 2, I was disappointed that people would let their personal relationships get in the way of policy work that impacts all of our residents, all of you, all of, and me. So that's my thoughts on the matter, Everett.
Thanks, Crystal. Do we have any other questions for our candidates? Could you identify yourself, please?
My name's Roxy Poole. I don't know what ward I'm in or anything. But I know I'm not in John's ward, and I have a question for you. Because you said something about feeling safe in our homes, and I moved here. I moved down to Denver in about '78, and I'm from the mountains, and I felt safe up there, and I felt safe down here. And in the last couple of years, I don't feel safe at all anymore. So
Why is that?
Why? I know, I've heard it. I guess because there are the cars that drive so fast, they're going to kill you. The people that are shooting everybody every day. I mean, that's why. I mean, there's so much crime. So anyway, I used to sleep with my windows open. I can't do that anymore. Things like that. I take it back.
Thanks for that question. Does somebody want to deal with safety?
And the reason I ask is because I think sometimes when we focus on safety, we tend to gravitate towards one area, and it's, in my opinion, very multifaceted, right? So you talked about the drag racing, which I think is really great that the council was able to be completely unified on that policy point.
I wasn't talking about the drag racing.
I asked why you felt unsafe, and you
No,
mentioned
the cars. No, I just mean the cars the way they drive. There's nobody giving any tickets.
I understand, but
down the highway.
in addition to the traffic issues, there is still that drag racing component too, right? But you're exactly right. So I live pretty far south, and so every day I have to drive on Parker Road south of 225. It's 45, but I see people going 65 to 75, right? It's a state road, the way that it's built, it kind of invites those speeds, unfortunately. I've been very deliberate in trying to slow down, and it's amazing to see how people will just zip right along. No, you were absolutely right. There are traffic and safety concerns in that area. I went to the drag racing component because I wanted to actually give the council a pat on the back for actually being unified on a policy point. And that was one of them. Crime, the discourse on crime, we can't ignore what's happening, right? We also have a lot of property thefts, right? When I'm on doors, people talk about how their catalytic converters are being stolen, right? And people shouldn't have to worry about their property. I really wish that you could still sit with your windows open, that you could feel safe like that. That is a challenge in a growing city, right? I hope that whatever rise in crime we've seen, and it's been up and down. I mean, last year we were coming off of a decrease. Now we're seeing a lot of people say that there's an increase. But depending on where you're focusing, there's a lot of variation, right? The last statistical report that the police put out, our murder rate was actually down 33% from that point in the year prior, right? But that's not to say that we don't still have serious problems around assaults, around domestic violence, around guns getting into the wrong hands. Our youth violence in particular, and I know Candice is very passionate about this as well, are things that we have to be direct about, right? We have a police department that is incredibly strapped, under-resourced, The police chief, Chief Wilson, said recently in a city council meeting that she does not want to put her officers on calls to go sweep homeless camps because they're so strapped, right? Fortunately, and I hope that this is the beginning of some improvements, I've mentioned it a lot, I'm probably acting like the de facto spokesperson for them, but the city just launched the Aurora Mobile Response Team that focuses on issues of homelessness, mental health issues, and addiction, so that hopefully our police will not focus on further criminalizing some of those, what may be seen to be minor calls, in comparison to some of the more devious and heinous calls that they have to respond to some of the more pressing and maybe even violent crime, right? So I'm hoping that we can actually divert resources to the right place so that we can remedy some of those areas that we do have in the city and focus on some of the more violent crimes. I think that the council needs to deeply engage our community partners, schools, law enforcement, neighborhood associations to do everything we can to promote good public safety. And I'm not beyond saying that we need to put some more restrictions on gun sales in Aurora. I mean, this has been a topic we've talked about a lot. I do not believe personally that civilians should own semi-automatic weapons. There have been too many wounds in this community that have been tied back to those types of weapons, and I don't want to see it anymore. This is all of our backyards. We don't want to see it. So what I do want you to know is that your concerns are not unfounded. Part of the reason I asked is because it's so multifaceted that we have to focus on so many different areas. And we have to. We can't ignore it. We've patted ourselves on the back in the past, saying that Aurora is one of the safest big cities. And in comparison, it still is, for the most part. But I think, just this really unfortunate pandemic, we've seen a loss of lives, we've seen a loss of jobs. That's all correlated to some unfortunate activity, where people have probably felt forced to make some choices that were not the best choices. I truly hope, and I'm being very optimistic here, that we can come out of this pandemic and kind of have a little bit of a renaissance. People will be gainfully employed, they'll be happy and secure again in all those ways that I described beforehand. Because I believe that correlation of the incidences of crime and people who fall on hard times is something to pay attention to. And when we put resources into the community, I believe that we can really then try to focus more on public safety. And it'll give us that greater sense of security. So, all right. I'm a professor, so I ramble a lot.
And then you test them all.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Does someone else want to deal with that issue of public safety? Candice?
Yeah, so I hear you. So public safety is kind of my baby in a million different ways. I've worked in juvenile justice, community reentry, diversion, high fidelity wraparound. There's not many places I haven't been inside of public safety. It's really what I have done for a very long time. And so everything that you are saying comes down to just a few things. We have a youth violence prevention committee in our community now at the city of Aurora that takes leaders, and we band with Denver. We're touching surrounding communities as well. The importance is that we do not have dialogue within our communities. Law enforcement, first responders, we don't have some best practices that help us to respond appropriately when we are coming into crises as a first responder. So we started a program called GRIT, Gaining Resilience Inside of Trauma, that begins to address some of the things that lead to that violence within our communities. So we have to start digging in and looking at the almost $60 million that goes to public safety, which is our #1 contractor, APD, right? When we're looking at that money, some of that money needs to be divested in other places that have proven history of change inside of public safety. We are putting reliance on human beings and calling them blue lives. They are human lives. We must stop doing that. We have to humanize our officers again and recognize if we have a test that says if early childhood trauma has happened, if divorce has happened, if violence, drugs, alcohol, all of these things have happened, you are 100% likely to have a violent outcome somewhere in your life. But wait a minute, what about our officers? They are dealing with violence and trauma all day long. But we're saying you're a blue life. No, you are a human life, and we need to recognize that. We need to honor and respect that, and we must divert those dollars into grassroots organizations that are already doing violence prevention, violence intervention, gang prevention, gang intervention. We have to invest in our community. There are people who are experts that do this, that have lived this, and that can come in and change something. Because where we're working right now is from a penal side, meaning that we're going to punish you. But we've never treated the fact that you watched your mother get murdered when you were 4. We cannot continue as a society to ask people to heal and then ask them to go figure out how to do as such and think that we as a society will not bear that cost somehow. We are bearing the cost as a society, and we have to make a decision about what this looks like for each and every one of us right now. We have a police department right now that has, I know of, at least 17 lawsuits that will supersede our $10 million liability insurance clause. At least 17, that's what I know about. What are they burying? What do we not know about? Because there is no transparency right now about what is happening, and we all know this. Just like the windows at the bottom of the municipal building, we're being held out. We can't see into the top of the tower, so we don't get what's happening. And when we are talking public safety, we better get serious really soon. Because what's knocking on door 1 in Ward 1 is knocking on door 6 in Ward 6. Money does not stop violence. And crime is not stopped by policing. We are taking words and making responsibility happen in the wrong places. It is our community that has to look at what public safety truly is. You can't give $60 million to a single entity and see the violence that we are seeing right now and think that this is the solution that we should be utilizing going forward. And our #1 contractor is sinking our city fiscally. I don't know about you, but I know how to do math. I am a small business owner and a nonprofit owner. My small business says if I have a singular contractor that is a liability to my business and is sinking my business, I must sever that contract. We must get serious. There's this old saying in politics that people keep bringing to me. If you want to know a city's true priorities, look at their budget. Our budget is given to public safety, and yet you're talking to me about public safety, and every door I'm knocking is talking to me about public safety. We must reimagine what public safety truly is, and how do we acquire that? How do we not put the constraint on an officer who is they're not social workers. They're not here, they can't deal with mental health crises. That's why the CRT team came into play, which is the critical response team in Aurora. We helped establish that a couple of years ago because police don't have the responsibility to come and do mental health welfare checks. That is not their job. We have to stop this. We have this thing that it's like, defund the police. Why do we keep saying the word defund? We have to take this money and we have to move it inside of public safety where it makes sense. We have experts that are sitting outside of the wall watching what's happening, watching our children be murdered, watching people on the streets be murdered for absolutely zero reason because we will not divest in a singular contractor that is blatantly murdering us, and yet we're putting more money into more experts from outside coming in, and we're getting the same answers that City Council gave, the same answers that the Police Oversight Committee gave, but it cost us a lot of money to get a report from an outside expert to tell us what we already knew to be true. Inside of our communities, public safety is the #1 factor that drives everything, but it is dependent again on economics. If everyone does not have a job, a place to live, food to eat, we are going to continue to see this struggle, period. And so we must dig in as a community and figure out how do we support our local small businesses with incentives, not corporations, That is the backbone of this community. We are a bedroom community, and we are more likely to own a business within this community because we are vested in the city of Aurora as people who live here. We don't just get up and pack up and move. Our spirit says we shall fight. And so I say, in reference to public safety, we've got to fight as a unit. We've got to get our neighborhood watches back together. We have to be talking to each other like neighbors. We have got to get up and fight for our city, and that means we've got to have tough conversations and make some tough decisions. But now is our time. We have to do this together because I don't want you to not feel safe ever, ever, ever.
Thanks, Candice. Does anyone else want to take a crack at that, Brian?
I'll be brief. What's not a shot at you? I just want more questions.
Okay, I'm long-winded.
That was not a shot at either one of those. I said I'll be brief. I am also a teacher, so I can be long-winded. But in summation, I think the biggest thing is that we recognize an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we need to look at the root cause of what's increasing crime, crimes of desperation, things like that. So let's invest in things that are proactive: housing, wages, things for our youth to be doing, things to keep us active. But let's focus on preventing crime, not constantly investing in the reaction to crime. Is what I focus on.
Thanks, Brian. Another question?
Just real quick, and this is a yes or no, do you think Chief Wilson is capable of bringing it back?
The question is Chief Wilson, our current police chief, capable of bringing the city back? Back to what?
The police department, back from the bad publicity, all the bad stuff. That, is she capable of making it better, hiring more officers, bringing community policing back? Is she capable of doing that?
No.
Yes, she is.
I think no, because she does not have the support of the Aurora Police Association, nor the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, and they have asked for her to be removed. They're going through that formal process. And what I can tell you is, if the body severs the head, it doesn't matter what's happening. She can make all of the policies she wants, she can enforce it, but the moment that they turned on her was the moment that all hope was gone, because she will not remain in the seat without support, and that is the problem. Chief Wilson has come in and done some things that says, yes, I'm taking steps forward. Yes, I want to improve policing in Aurora, without a doubt. But the moment that the FOP and the APA came out and did what they did, first of all, they're saying that they do not want to bring down the morale in Aurora Police Department, and I find that very hard to believe if you just severed your head. I find that very hard to believe, and that will be something that she cannot bounce back from, because the morale now has a new leader called the FOP and the APA, and they're not supporting her appropriately as their leader.
Oh, okay, let's get some other responses. Crystal, do you have a response to that? It's supposed to be a yes or no question.
Well, kind of, but that was a good answer.
Yeah. Do you want me to use that microphone? I'm not as loud as Candice, unfortunately. It's hard to answer. Like, just to be really straightforward, I don't think it's a yes/no question. I don't disagree with what Candice is saying. I think right now, it's not one person, right? She is the leader, right? And she's going to be held accountable for the overall, actions of the police department. Same with city council, same with city manager. But we know that there are policies in place that she, at this moment, doesn't even have control over the process of hiring her own officers. So we know from the AG reports and other independent third-party reports that in some ways she's handicapped in doing her full duties. I don't agree with everything she's done, but I will give credit where credit is due. I think there have been some changes that I agree with, and some changes that are still to come that she has no control over. And I think the tactic from the that no confidence vote that came out, it was a symbolic vote, but in a lot of ways, like, it's the system pushing back. Like the system that we're trying to change, not wanting to change, which is wholly frustrating. These same organizations, when the indictments came out around the Elijah McClain case, all of those charges against the officers, basically stuck with the same talking points, even after this independent third-party review, and basically said that none of the officers did anything wrong, sticking to the same old. I find that really hard. Like, how can you not make room for an independent third-party organization, our Attorney General's office? How can you not make room for the validity of those, indictments? So, I'm sorry, I don't have a yes, no, not to be non-committal, but I just feel like we're not in a place where this person can be successful. I do agree with some of the changes that the chief has made thus far. It's not solely on her, because we as city council have some decisions to make that will give her more ability to impact her own police department or whomever, right?
Yeah. That's a good answer.
Yeah. Sorry.
Notable that Chief Wilson is a woman, and
the key one there.
LGBT. So I think, personally, I think that's one reason that they're being so hard on her, because she was handed a real mess, and she's doing, from my perspective, she's doing the best she can.
But she needs the help. Yes, she does.
I guess the answer is that she's doing the best she can, and she needs a hell of a lot of help. Okay, is there another question for our city council?
If you dare.
Ellen? Identify yourself.
Ellen, who? I am in Ward 1, Police District 1. But my question is there any hope in dissolving the speculative trickle-down economic theory to the budget? Hasn't worked for over 40 years, and it still doesn't work.
Can somebody address that?
Do you want to elaborate?
Right,
Ellen, can you elaborate on what you mean?
Well, I mean,
In the micro.
this whole
Specify.
the whole speculative thing that it's going to bring in all these tax dollars, and it doesn't. The whole Gaylord mess, $300 million for a 25-year return, which is now becoming over $1 billion. Maybe in 35 years we'll get it back. I mean, that whole thing is set in corruption, and so is the Aurora Highlands thing. That is whole corruption. I mean, in my lifetime, am not going to see the payback in it. I see the programs that are being cut. I see, $300 million when it was approved. And yet, how many programs can that money have gone to? $1 billion, how many programs can that go to? We just keep crying, but yet it's all speculative, trickle-down economics.
So what's the question again? I'm sorry.
So how can we change the budget? Let's get real money. And then it's on grants. That's soft money. That's not a given that is truly there. We can't keep functioning like this. That's not sustainable infrastructure.
Everett, I can attempt to. So, Ellen, there's a lot in there, and I know you and I have had this conversation before. So let me attempt to get at part of your question and question there. So what I heard was a concern and frustration with large incentives, right, to companies like the Gaylord, right? So my opinion on economic development, yeah, no, none of us were on council when that deal happened. I don't agree with necessarily those incentives that went to bringing the Gaylord here. I tend to not be for those types of incentives because I feel like it's a race to the bottom. I feel like these big companies who can locate anywhere, right? They're shopping around, they're going to find the best deal. You know, oh, Aurora gave us this much, how much can you do? To where they want to locate. So they're looking for the sweetest deal. And, you know, I don't tend to think that is in our best favor, right? Like it's literally a race to the bottom. What's the cheapest amount of the best deal? And to me, the best deal in their eyes is taking away sales tax dollars, for example, which our city needs. So yeah, I agree. We need to, if we're going to do economic incentives, I think we need to make sure that these companies are good to their workers. They pay livable wages. I said I cared about that. If we're going to offer incentives, the businesses that we're attracting here, I think we want to be ethical, moral businesses that are treating their employees with dignity in that regard. You know, what are the violations, right? Like, what are other ways that we can create like tangible economic benefit? Are they hiring local, right? Are they sourcing their labor locally? What else are they contributing to our city to make it better? A job doesn't guarantee that it's going to trickle down and that we will feel that impact, right? So I want to know tangibly, okay, if you're bringing jobs, what's the pay range? I don't want to know the average. If you have janitors and then a CEO or managers, that average is going to look great. I want to know how much your lowest paid employees are being paid, for example. So I don't think that's a solution, Ellen, but I'm telling you, I guess my decision-making process to overcome that, I would prioritize incentives for our local small businesses instead. How do we maintain their vibrancy? How do we make sure that they can continue to keep their doors open? One idea, kind of out there, but the idea of like a land trust. So how do we, land is expensive. A lot of the businesses don't actually own their land or their brick and mortar like property. So how can we make sure that there's more opportunities for them to build wealth for themselves and not just the landlord, for example? That to me is the kind of incentives that we want. Can we create a land trust for small businesses? Can we acquire land and sell it or lease it at a very reasonable cost instead of, you know, upping the price on small businesses just on rent? So you had a lot there, Ellen, but that was my attempt at answering some of it.
You know I don't ask you.
Right, and I'm wondering the same. Is Gaylord giving as much back to the city as the city is giving to Gaylord?
No, not for at least 30 years.
And I guess it said not for at least 30 years. Okay, do we have any other questions for our candidates?
I've got a funny question. It's not a hard one.
Okay.
Well, I think it's funny. Where's Jim Twombly? Does anyone know where Jim Twombly is? Isn't he like the highest paid public official in Aurora and he's like, doesn't show up to anything? Like, can anyone give me like some information as to what like Jim Twombly does? Because he's like nowhere to be found. It's like, where's Waldo? Where's Jim Twombly?
He's the city manager?
Yeah.
The question is, where is the city manager? And the city manager runs the city staff, and nobody here knows exactly what he does. But I think he does a lot personally. Okay.
One quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
So with housing, the ratio that's been around all the time for decades or whatever is a third of your rent, or yeah, a third for the rent, of your earnings. So I was just wondering, I mean, is there like a specific maybe effort or vision or strategy that we could work towards to get to that point where it is 1/3 for mostly everybody, I guess, and how long might that take? Like how soon can that be, or is it just, because it's I feel like we're gonna become San Francisco and all that, and how can we actually have some, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good question.
I guess the question is, does the city council have anything to do with the price of rent and the price of homes in the city of Aurora?
Creating affordable housing. Right. Right.
Candice?
So I think that was kind of multifaceted, and I hear what you're saying. So inside of the city, we have our own housing authority inside the city of Aurora, the Aurora Housing Authority. And so it's very interesting because it is not really a city entity, strangely, and they don't have products that really work for the community for affordable housing. So for instance, inside of Adams County, they have a program if you enter into that housing authority where a part of your rent actually goes into an escrow account so that you can purchase a home. You have to go through a whole program so that you become able to manage a budget, become fiscally responsible, find out how to cook so that you're living within your means, how to purchase clothes, insurance, how to shop for, it is very in-depth. Aurora does not have that. Aurora has none of that. We're not looking from the perspectives, and here's another ampersand. Aurora has had a closed waiting list for probably 7 years, and prior to that, the waiting list was so out of control, you couldn't get on it. You had to get on a lottery system, or you had to transfer, or what it's called, port into the city of Aurora if you had a voucher for housing. Aurora has no true affordable housing program. It is not structured. There is no capacity built for it. We are a city that lacks infrastructure in a million different ways because of how we were thrown together. And in my personal opinion, everything that we're talking about tonight, really we need a strategist to come in. We're growing at a rate that is superseding every city that touches us. By the time we're at 2037, we will supersede the population of every major city that is touching us. That's serious because we're not ready. We're not built and we're not ready. As we watch the divestiture of the Tri-County health system, we're watching our everything fall apart because we sit in a place where we are Adams, Douglas, and Arapahoe County. We must look at infrastructure. We don't have roads infrastructure. We're chasing $20 million a year for potholes. We have no infrastructure. We have to have experts come in and tell us, how do we do this? And not on the backs of our people. And housing, you can have houses everywhere because we see them everywhere. They're putting them up everywhere. But if they're not affordable and they're not accessible, they're just a pretty charm for someone from California to come move into. So when you're talking about getting us to a place where we're talking about a third of our income being rent, if we do not create some type of cap on rent, developers coming in and buying single-family residents at a rate that is astonishing. Astonishing. We're not seeing people and families purchase homes anymore. We are seeing corporations and developers come in. Developers are coming in, they're building, but they are not giving back to our community. They need to be taxed at a rate that is exponential, and not the people who are already here struggling to survive every day. And so when we're talking about getting to that third of your income ratio for housing, if we don't dig into a rent cap, an equal livable wage, and creating housing that is accessible, we're going to continue to lose. And we better get serious because we're not going to get smaller. And it's not happening. We better get serious right now.
And just to add to that, Look, when I was first elected in 2017, it was the majority opinion that it was not the job of the Aurora City Council to get involved in housing. So that's where we started from, and we're in 2021. It feels like a slow, steady march in a different direction. When I was first elected, I was in the minority of a political opinion that the city council should get involved. 2019, we got a few other folks on our side elected. That's where we're at again in 2021. We have the potential to get the votes needed because in addition to what Candice said, right, we've laid a foundation, but a plan is only as good as a plan. And housing is speculative. So when you have an asset that people stand to make money on in a hot housing market, there's always going to be kind of that predatory buying of homes, right? So 60%, and I feel this, 60% of my